On a suddenly not so casual Send It Saturday. It is January 21st, 2023. It is NFL Divisional Saturday. The hype is building. I'm getting energized. Welcome to the show. It is Sharky Waters Nation, 9 Words of Lifestyle. Ride the wave. We're getting out of the water. 2-game slate today. Guns, picks. What's going on this afternoon, my brother?
Bitch, we're having ourselves a beautiful Saturday. Listen, the wildcard round was absolutely breathtaking for me. I absolutely swept the board on Sunday, going 4-2 overall for the wildcard round. And I'm ready to dominate the divisional round. That's all I got to say about that. Oddsfell, what do you think? How's your Saturday?
Just excited. We still got 2 days of football. I love the way the slate is broken up. We got some great games. I'm going to be a lot less stressed today. Maybe a little bit more stressed tomorrow with all those hats you guys saw. So we'll get into that Cowboys game then. But excited to talk 2 games today.
Absolutely. Not waiting around. Big conversation coming here. We're going to go 20, 25 minutes. We're going to get all the details. We have picks, officials, we have sides, and we have totals. Guns picks, first official, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 3:30 down in Kansas City, Missouri, Arrowhead Stadium. It's going to be an ice box down there, I think. But a lot to talk about here. Jacksonville on the road off a huge, huge win, a couple highs in a row, and a dub 6. Hottest team in the sport. Who would have thought we would have said that going back to early season when this team came out 3-7. Revenge game on the road. They did play to a 27-17 final going back to week 10. Guns picks opening the broadcast with an official.
I see the chat's already getting live right now. Exactly. Your boy, Sam, razor sharp in the building, the hottest capper, and kicked out of a horse track, I believe, for taking too much damn money from him. But let's talk about the Jags. Let's talk about the Chiefs in this one. I'm on the Jags on this one. I did get the worst of the line. I did get them at +9. I think you can get +9.5, +10s everywhere, but I think this is more predicated on a Jaguars team that is running red hot, and I'm just going to stick with the trend and keep going with the Jags here. Now, they're coming off that epic win last week versus the Chargers, 31-30. They were down 27-0 at one point and came back and won the game. They had a +70 net yards for that game. Now, Kansas City coming off a bye week after 5 straight wins with a +10 point differential, +96 net yard average. The Jags, like Shark just said, dub 6. They're on a 6-game winning streak coming into this game with a +12 point differential, +45 net yard average in the last 4 games. So this is a team that is really playing and heating up under Peterson. I think they found the right coach, and I think they do have the right quarterback in Trevor Lawrence as he grows into his form. But now let's talk about Kansas City here. They're not ranked number 1 in DVOA in passing the ball, 5th in pass protection with a 4% sack rate. With the Jags, they're a good passing team as well. Ranked 6 in passing DVOA offensively and ranked 6 in DVOA as an offensive line, so they can protect the quarterback with a 4.7 sack rate given up. So these two teams met in November. All right. KC won the game 27-17 as 10-point favorites. And you have the Jags losing the net yard battle in that one, -171 with a +3 turnover ratio, which kept that game really close. But I just think the Jags are just going to be a little bit better on this one. They're going to take care of the football, and they're going to actually move the ball against this Kansas City team that doesn't have a good passing defense. Also, got to look at Kansas City, 1-6-1 against the spread at home this season, where the Jags are 7-2-1 against the spread in the last 9 games. I'm not going to take the cold team on this one. I'm going to be taking the hot team, especially the Jags are just they got their rhythm going. I always worry about these teams coming off a bye week. We don't know what the rust factor is with that as far as rhythm is concerned. I think the Jags are just going to keep this game close. And actually, with how these two defenses play against the pass, probably a lean to the over on this one as well for me. Maybe an official play before kickoff, but I'm going to be going with the Jags on this one, +9, 2-unit special.
Yeah, and jumping off that, I want to discuss the game, then I'll discuss the total. We'll go to Anthony here in a minute. When you start to really look at Kansas City this year, and we've talked about this over and over on this broadcast, Kansas City has been a horrendous home favorite for years now. Ever since Patrick Mahomes and the boys became a championship quality team, laying these big figures, they have not been very effective. This year, interesting splits did develop. They were 0-3 ATS at home inside of the division. Non-cover early season in primetime against the Chargers, another one in primetime against the Raiders, and a late season cover, which we had correctly against Denver. But you go outside of the division, 5 separate ball games. They were actually 3-2 ATS, and the 3 covers were extremely tight and I would say fortunate covers. A game against Seattle, they won 24-10, where they were laying 9.5 points, and they got outgained in the game significantly and did not really control the game or the clock at all. A backdoor cover against Bryce Perkins and the Rams, 26-10 on a 15.5. Shout out to the odds makers for being the sharpest people on the planet, and it was a backdoor at that. Nonetheless, unimpressive. And the aforementioned game in Week 10 against the Jaguars. Here's my problem with taking the Jaguars. Of those 3 games, they shouldn't have covered against the Rams. They shouldn't have covered against Seattle. The Jaguars game is actually the one they probably should have won by more margin. KC did dominate that game on all fronts. They outgained them 486-315, and the game really was a comedy of errors. And that's going to segue me to the total. I'm taking officially 1 unit over 52.5 in this game. And staying course with this conversation, a really interesting thing stood out to me when I started handicapping this game last night. Kansas City is 0-5 versus the over at home this year against out-of-division opponents. Very lackluster stuff. 24-20 against Buffalo, 20-17 against Tennessee, 27-17 against Jacksonville, 26-10 against the Rams, 24-10 against Seattle. But if you really go through those games, a lot of interesting stuff in the details of those games. 2 of those games were against backup pedestrian non-starting quarterbacks, Malik Willis, Liberty's finest, and Bryce Perkins, journeyman, same state, Virginia University, not representative offensive football there. And then the statistical anomalies and outliers told the story. 24-20 against Buffalo, 830 yards in the game. 27-17 against Jacksonville, 801 yards in the game. And the game against Seattle, 24-10, 630 yards in the game. I'll throw it to Anthony. He confirms the play, an alignment play. Throw it back to me, and I have a couple more comments on this total.
Yeah, I'm coming with. I mean, we'll talk about that game a little bit. It was a little strange, right? Lands at 44. You get this thing that opens, I think, at 50.5 to 51, gets immediately steamed up to the 53. I still like it there. So I'm coming with Shark. You know, that was a 27-17 final. Interestingly enough, a tight cover for Kansas City, although they've been garbage against the spread, as we have alluded to. You know, a few weird things happened in that game, and I'll let Shark handle a lot of those, but it was also a slow third quarter, only 10 points, a field goal by Jacksonville, and then a touchdown by Kansas City, and then I think a late touchdown by the Jags, and that was it. So a slower second half, and that'll tie into a little bit what he said about the yards. Another thing I want to point out here, just in terms of this total, is if you look at Jacksonville, they've only really played 5 above average offenses, you know, kind of down the stretch or even throughout the year. And in those games, right, they've allowed 31 points per game. You know, that's the likes of the Cowboys, obviously the Chiefs earlier, you know, a couple others. And in those games, you know, they've trailed by halftime, an average of 9 points. They've trailed going into the fourth quarter by an average of 7 points, and 5 of 6 in each of those spots. So usually down at the half, usually down going into the fourth. That could mean garbage time points. That could mean KC has their way. There's also some telling spots, I think, home versus road splits here for Jacksonville. So another way you could attack this game besides the total, which we'll keep talking about, is, you know, you could look Kansas City first half. You could look Jacksonville second half. In their last 10 games, they've covered that second half spread 9 out of 10. So I think the game script here that we're probably going to get is hopefully a amped up KC team at home that wants to put their foot down, does get it right. They can tap into that kind of porous defense from a Jacksonville standpoint, especially against the pass DVOA wise. I think against the pass, they come in here, too many notes, 30th defensively against the pass. There's only 32 teams in the NFL, folks, so not very good. So I think Mahomes has his way. Hopefully that 31 points per game matters. And hopefully for Gunn's sake, the Jags and that garbage time points matter.
Yeah, and jumping back off that, you know, I see the chat. And we encourage you guys to chat more, drop your plays, your angles, your commentary. We appreciate it immensely, sending you guys the best possible vibes. I do want to make a comment about the weather, and I've been saying this for close to a decade before I had this channel. Weather in sports, in professional football particularly, does not mean no points. What it means is defenders backpedaling have worse footing. Oftentimes the games open up completely. It's a really kind of, I don't know, just a
wind is what you want to look for.
Wind's a big one for totals.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. Even snow. you see games that go up into the 60s with snow because the footing's terrible for the defense. And, running game downhill, it's not as hard for the offense. So just keep that in mind, guys, when you're capping weather. It doesn't mean no points. Oftentimes it means the opposite. And speaking of a comedy of errors, let's go through that game in week 10 and how it got to 27-17. And as Anthony mentioned, the line opened that week at 50 and it went under 44. This opened at 50.5 and got immediate steam to 52.5, which is telling you that game was an outlier. And what was the outlier? I mean, start in the very beginning of the game. Jacksonville opened the game with an onside kick. They actually recovered an onside kick to open the game. It was the first time in 5 years. And maybe not coincidentally, they didn't score on that possession. And Jacksonville was accumulating yards and not scoring. And they did punt on their first 5 possessions. And maybe not coincidentally yet again, missed a field goal, which is not going to help your over. And then Jacksonville started the second half with a 10-minute drive, 10 minutes, and only got a field goal. In that whole whirlwind of action, Kansas City had another kickoff fumbled for Jacksonville, in which I believe they did get a touchdown there. The game, as I mentioned before, had 801 yards and somehow only finished at 27-17. Jacksonville comes in here 2-0 versus the under in their last 2 road games. But I think very importantly, those games were at the New York Jets, the primetime game where people really saw just how terrible Zach Wilson is, and a divisional game where Jacksonville did put up 31 against a fairly representative Lovie Smith defense down there in Houston, and a game where Houston's offense only put 3 points on the field. I have to remind you something. The Houston Texans are not the Kansas City Chiefs. This game will be wide open. 1-1 final point. I'll throw it back to the gun for some final comments on this game. Last year, in their home playoff opener, Kansas City did play Pittsburgh. People had the same narratives. Pittsburgh can't score. It's Roethlisberger. This is going to be a dud fest. The game finished 42-21 and went over the total by over 20 points. All boxes checked here. Numbers and narrative. Top play on the board. Over 52.5 official. Guns picks. Are we good in this game? Should we move on?
Yeah, we should move on, but I want to say one thing. It's like, look at the total, what the total was in the KC Jags game when they played before. I think the total closed at like 51. Now that total, of course, that did go under. Now the total's sitting right now, 52.5, 53. So there's a 2-point separation, virtually in the same type of conditions that they played in the first game, because they're playing in Kansas City one more time. So take that into notation. When we look at line correlation, it's very important to understand what the lines were in the first matchup versus what they are now.
Absolutely, 100%. And, I say this about every single sport. Oftentimes you can handicap professional sports without knowing anything about the players. And I always make a joke. You could cap, Russian soccer or ping pong overseas, because truly numerical averages, books are tabulating. They're telling you the story of what's going to happen in the game. They tell you where one thing is an anomaly and where it should sustain to the average going the other direction. So top play on the board, the over, and let's go to the second game. Second game, this is going to be a hell of a game, 8:15 p.m. on Saturday night. I'm hyped for it. I'm not in Philadelphia. I'm not in Pennsylvania. I'm in Florida, but I know the energy will be real at Lincoln Financial Field. And I know my guy Philly Sharp's hyped. I know the entire state of Philadelphia on the eastern side is hyped. I can't say the same about the western side, but an NFC divisional rivalry battle. And I was making a comment off the record, but the NFL could not have scripted these games any better from an entertainment standpoint. Every game is just more or less as if they handpicked the teams that are going to play each other for the best possible product. And say no more about the Giants and the Eagles. You get the Giants coming in here off a Week 18 loss, 22-16 a game, where Jalen Hurts came back. I think he was just kind of, they got up 16-0 at the half and then just kind of coasted it out in the second half. You get a double revenge game for the Giants, short number, and we're throwing it to the gun for the first official play of this game. Guns, what's going on in this game?
Yeah, when you actually watch that game in Week 18, it kind of felt like a preseason game. I mean, you had the backups playing for the Giants, and I think they were trying to get Jalen Hurts some reps in before they actually got into the playoffs. They did get the win.
They had to win that game to lock up the number one seed to the Cowboys.
They didn't need a bit.
Not the number one seed, the division. The division, yeah.
Yep. They didn't need to win by a lot. They got the win. They got the bye. They're well rested going against this Giants team that really is playing red hot. I'll give it to them. They're coming off that road win versus Minnesota, a team that we fade consistently. 31-24, cash that ticket, plus 99 net yards for the game. Giants plus 6-point differential, plus 69 net yard average in the last 4 games. So they're really playing well right now. But they're going against a Philly team off a bye. Still got the didn't really play their best game versus the Giants in Week 18, but they did have plus 58 net yards for the game. Giants struggle versus divisional opponents. Okay. You actually look at their divisional splits on this one 1-4-1 straight up versus divisional opponents with a -7 point differential, -95 net yard average in the division. Now you got you look at Philly versus division 4-2 straight up, +6 point differential, +44 net yard average versus divisional opponents. So a little bit of a yin and yang here. There's a reason why Philly is the top team in the NFC East. That if you look at the Giants and you look at what they don't do well, they can't stop the run. They're ranked 32nd in DVOA and rushing defense, 5.2 yards per carry given up this season, 5.5 yards per carry versus divisional opponents. And Philly, what do they like to do, folks? They love to run the ball. In terms of DVOA rushing, they have 4.6 yards per carry, and they have the dual threat Miles Sanders and Jalen Hurts. This is a team that can run on you, and that's going to accentuate. If you can run the football, you control the clock. You can also do a little bit of play action and get guys open. And believe me, Philly has some pretty solid receivers as well. Now you got the Giants. They are able to run versus Philly, 21st in defensive DVOA. Philly is, but passing the ball is going to be very difficult versus Philly, and they're going to need to do that with Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones had a great season overall, and including passing the ball, but Philly's ranked number 1 in passing defense DVOA this season. So I think this is going to be a team that's going to come out here red hot. They're playing at home, and this is a team that's going to try to make a run at the Super Bowl here. I don't know if they'll get there for sure, but we'll talk about some of the plays on Sunday. We may have some maybe some future leans going into this one, but I'm going to be on Philly. I think Philly really stomps the Giants here. It's -7.5 for a reason, and I'm going to take Philly -7.5, and it's a 3-unit play for me.
Well then, take note, people.
3-unit.
We are hyped on a suddenly not.
I rarely lose the 3-unit plays.
Not 1,
okay?
not 2, 3.
Yes.
And segueing over to Anthony here, we're going to talk about the total. Looking at the over with significance.
Yeah, why not? The over, dominated last week. What could possibly go wrong here? But I do like the 2 overs on Saturday. It is what it is. I think, one thing to mention here just on the side too, or, a myth you guys might hear a lot is, tough to beat a team 3 times. It is tough, right? This is a division matchup now in the second round of the playoffs, which is really interesting. But the third team going for the sweep in these spots is 15-9 straight up. So still an advantage. Still tough, but I think worth noting, everyone thinks it's an automatic, maybe that thing's 0 for 24. It's not. I do have some terrible memories of the Cowboys in 2007, though, against this Giants team, losing as the number 1 seed. I digress. So let's look at these 2 matchups, right? 48-22 in the first one, 70 total points on a 44.5 total. The second one came in at 38 in that weird Week 18 matchup, but like we said, not everybody was playing. But if you go back to that other matchup, I don't need 70 points. I don't think we're going to get 70 points. Even that Giants team in that spot was kind of a look ahead, right? They didn't need the game. As weird as that sounds in the division, it was meaningless. If you remember, they had Washington on deck in a kind of a must-win spot in terms of where the playoff race and the seeding mattered. So even when you look statistically at what the Giants did in that game, they weren't running. Saquon had a limited availability. He did play. But not a ton of carries, not a ton of volume. He's healthy now. Danny Dimes wasn't rolling out, wasn't rushing like the designed way that they usually script for him with Brian Dable. So I think you're going to see more of that. I think you're going to see a fluid Giants offense that's going to be able to keep up and get some points. The Eagles, on the other hand, are one of the top offenses in the league, right? One we've watched all year as they get healthier. From an offensive standpoint, they're 3rd overall DVOA. That's 9th pass, 1, like Guns alluded to, against the run. And you have that weird Giants team against the run. So the only downside here from the total is chewing clock. But I think you get the narrative, and it's baked into the number a little bit, even at that 47-48 range that it's been in. I do like it at over 48. A lot of people, I think, just thinking cold weather, division game, I'm going to hammer the under, right? I don't think that's what you're going to get here. And then one final thing that's really interesting, and I got a lot of this from Warren Sharp. Love the work that those guys do over there at Sharp Football. Giants are 7-1 to the over in the last 8 games. That excludes that Week 18 game with the weird rest situation, when their guys weren't playing. So the previous 8 games to that 7-1. Philadelphia at home the last 2 years, 12 of their 17 games have gone over. That number gets even tighter when you take out some of the outliers of guys not playing and some of the rest there. I think it jumps up to like 15 at 12 out of 15 if you take out 2 weird games in that stretch. But even 12 of 17 over the last 2 seasons, that's one of the top looks in the NFL from an over standpoint at home at one field. And then the Giants, the 7-1 over the last 8 games. So I think a lot of things here just moving in that direction. Both teams do get healthier on defense, so that's the one con, but I think you're going to get enough out of this. Hopefully a great game.
Yeah, and I think an interesting thing that just came to my mind when you were saying that, and there's a lot to discuss versus this total, but this reminds me of how NBA basketball in the playoffs regresses from high totals to unders in the playoffs stylistically. And I think professional football actually regresses from stylistic leatherhead, and I would say mediocrity, because a lot of the league cannot play offensive football in the playoffs, to high-paced, really efficient football. And what you're seeing here is 2 things. Actually 3. 1, the league wants points for entertainment. 2, the officiating is now centered on taking away physical contact in a lot of environments. The game will play more fluidly. And 3, the top teams in the sport have great offenses. This is just how the top teams play. So you're going to see more points. And you really start to go through this. Anthony mentioned it. I had it written down too here. The Giants' first 10 weeks, this is, if we're saying this total is 48, it did open at 46.5 and has gotten steamed up, which I think is telling you an intelligent story. But if we're saying versus a 48 figure, they only had 1 game in the first 10 weeks that went over a 48 figure. It was a 27-22 game against Green Bay over in London. But since week 11, they've had 6 totals result at 48 or higher. Daniel Jones has been playing great football all year. Brian Daboll's done a great job with this guy. He's eliminated his interceptions. He's really kind of tailored him into almost like a young Tom Brady. Manages the game very well. A lot of non-threatening throws. Uses his skill set and uses him in the run game very, very well, which I think is a very underrated aspect of this kid's game. And you do go through the matchups this year. I think this is very interesting within the Giants in terms of their consistency within the division. The Giants played a very similar game twice against Washington and Dallas. They played Washington and they tied. Anthony actually had the under in overtime. He was talking about how lucky he got to tie and not go over with a field goal at 41.5. They tied at 20-20. The other one was a low-scoring 20-12. So Washington twice, same game model. Dallas 28-20 with a backdoor touchdown. It was actually 28-13, so right around 41. The other one 23-16. 41, then a backdoor to get to 48, and a 23-16 right around that 40 margin. Very similar game. However, Giants-Philly, as Anthony mentioned, 48-22, 70 points in Giants Stadium going back to midseason. And the game that was most recently played, 22-16. Again, Philadelphia got it in the first half, 16-0. Both teams didn't really have a ton to play for. It became kind of a backup, non-motivational style game. And the line's telling you a really good story towards the over. If we look at line functionality versus the total in the division, the first game was a 44.5, and it went over to 70. The second game, books adjusted it down. So you go 44.5 over 70. All of a sudden, it's 42.5. They're telling you an understory, and it went under 22-16. Now, off the 38 under on a 42.5, they come all the way back up, not to 44.5, 46.5 with steam. I'm not on it officially yet, but I do think the over is the best look in this game. Guns Picks, any more comments? And what is going on here, brother?
Man, I just want to answer some questions in the chat. Exactly, had a real good question about a teaser on this one. I actually think I don't hate that teaser, but I really think that the KC moving that line down 6 points would be a little bit better. You go past some key numbers on that one, and I really do think KC is going to win this game. I just think they're going to do it by a possession. It's just going to be a back and forth type of over game. So when you have an over like that one, you need 2 teams to score. But I think this could come down to a possession. Also, yeah, Eagles -1.5. You go past some real key numbers. Get past that 7.5, past the 3. That I like that on a lot of teasers as well. Nothing else on this game. I do agree with Oddsfellow on the over on this one. I think this is going to be a back and forth type of game. And I think Eagles are going to control most of the running game. But hey, the Giants can score too. So yeah, pure awesome stats on that one. You may have sold me on the over.
Yeah, and I think the game side here, we were talking about this off the record. For me, this is a very, very sharp line. Of course, I'm not telling you anything crazy. When you see a line right around 7, 7.5, 8, a 1 touchdown line is going to be sharp in theory. It's not really telling you a lot of exploitability. If you really go through the line structure, it is short for Philly. And if you're going to cap this numerically, and I know a lot of people do not cap numerically, they look at who's a better team, who's a better quarterback, who has better motivation, what's the stadium. I get it. Trust me. I've been there. I'm 37 years old. I certainly capped like that for about 15 years of my life. I totally understand where you're at. I'm saying if you remove all that and you look at what Vegas algorithms are telling you and how they tabulate in probably the sharpest environment in the world, because again, they're making billions of dollars off people that try to beat their lines and narrative cap over their lines, which is not highly effective in a sustainable manner. They're telling you a Giants story here. The Giants at home were plus 7.5 and did get demolished. The game that was recently played was all the way up to minus 15.5. And of course, that was a bit of just a wish-wash nonsense type of game. But I do think if you really go back to the previous game, that was more of a real official NFL game. When you're laying 7.5 on the road and you demolish, you come home, same rosters, same motivation, peak motivation. This should be up around 10.5. It is short. It's telling you a New York Giants story. And the New York Giants have been great on the road all year, in and out of the division. If I had a free play, I would take it with the Giants. I do think this is potentially the type of game where Philadelphia wins this game by 7 on the number. So when you get this at plus 7.5, I think that's an advantageous. Nothing official for me there. Top look in the game is the over. Top official on the card, over 52.5. Jacksonville, Guns picks 2 officials. Jacksonville plus 9. Philadelphia minus 7.5. And the odds fellow fully aligned with myself. Over Jacksonville 52.5 and over Philadelphia 48. We are at now 27 minutes in the books on a suddenly not so casual Sunday, Saturday's divisional weekend. I was going to say wild card. It is definitely not wild card weekend. These are the top 4 teams in each conference. This is going to be professional football, fast-paced football, efficient football, high-level competitive football. Get ready for a hell of a Saturday. We appreciate you guys interacting, engaging with our show. It is Shark and Waters Nation, 9 Words of Lifestyle. Ride the wave or get out of the water. Guns picks, the odds fellow, my 2 co-hosts and co-partners here. You guys are the biggest dogs in the world. I love you guys to death. Guns picks, it's going to be a fucking day. Close them out and let's go.
Hey, the Shark hates all my plays, but guess what? I just keep firing, baby. That's all I do is just get with the gunshots. But it doesn't matter. You can take it's all about embracing debate here, folks. I love my plays regardless. If you want to tail, fade. It's all good. But thanks everybody in the chat. We had 58 of you beautiful bastards watching us live on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the Dad Boss channel. Make sure you hit the like button and also ding the bell so you know when we always go live. Appreciate you all. Let's have ourselves a damn Saturday. Check us out tomorrow, Sunday, 10 a.m. for the rest of the card in the divisional rounds when we break down the last 2 games on the slate. So good luck with your bets, everybody. Let's cash some tickets. And as always, let's keep dancing.